Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to my webinar this evening. This webinar is Am I Psychic? And I really think that the information I'm going to be covering this evening is going to be extraordinarily valuable to everyone here and probably everyone that you know. So I'm going to have a lot of information I'm going to go over, including a little introduction to myself. And I'm also going to give you a question and answer period at the end. And hopefully you're going to come away from this webinar with a really good understanding of what psychic abilities are, what your psychic abilities might be, and how you can better develop them. And anything else that comes up. I'm open to any and all possibilities, because that's one of the things about the psychic world. It's a world that's constantly evolving and constantly developing and constantly growing. So welcome. I think that it's going to be a fun next hour or hour and a half, and we're going to cover a lot of ground very, very quickly. I've been teaching psychic development. Most of you have heard of my program, the Anastasi System of Psychic Development. I've been teaching that program now for just about 40 years. It's been a long time. It was developed over a long period of time, so it didn't just happen overnight. First, there was a 6-week class, and then I added to that, and then there was a 6-month class, and before long, it turned into the series of classes that it is today. But the big thing is, and here's why you're here, is what drew Sandy Anastasi, to the psychic field to begin with. What drew Sandy, because I'm no different than you are, folks. You are me at the beginning of my journey. That's the only difference between us. And so I asked myself, what drew me to this field to become a psychic, to create the Anastasi system of psychic development, to teach the thousands of people who studied with me over the years how to utilize their psychic abilities and how to recognize those psychic abilities in other people. What brought me to that stage? So I just want to take a couple of minutes as I get started here to spend on my journey, because I think you're going to see yourself in my journey. I grew up in a small family. It was my parents, my sister, and I was very quiet. I was a bookworm. I didn't have a lot of friends or family members who were close to my age, so I did a whole lot of reading as a child. And I was always attracted to books that had to do with the depth of people's development, about how someone became something greater than they were. So just about every book I read was about that process of becoming. Little did I know back then that I was psychic. Now, I went through many, many psychic experiences as a youngster, and I'm going to refer to some of them in a moment. But you see, because I assumed that everyone was having the same experiences as me, I had no idea those were psychic experiences. I thought everyone was like that. I thought that the reason I didn't like being in crowds of people was because I was shy. I thought that the reason I got very confused when I was changing classes in my elementary school and my high school is because I had no sense of direction and I was easily confused. It never occurred to me that the energies from the other people in the hallway could be interfering with my ability to literally navigate the corridors. It never occurred to me when I would close my eyes at night and occasionally hear voices that that was something that didn't happen to everybody. In fact, to this day, I think it's something that happens to everybody. Okay. I also occasionally would see through the walls. I'd literally close my eyes and the room didn't go away. And there I was looking at the world outside of my house. And I'd say, oh, look at that. And then it would be gone. And I thought it was just my imagination. Why? Because that's what everybody told me. Gee, you are such an imaginative child. I heard that over and over again. I heard from my mother, Sandy could be so smart if she would only live in a world with her feet on the ground instead of off in La La Land. I remember my parents telling me all through my high school years that I'd better get a good, solid, feet on the ground boyfriend because I really needed somebody to take care of me because I was not going to have the common sense to take care of myself. Obviously, that has proved untrue over the years, but I want you to know that's the way my parents looked at me. They saw me as a dreamer. They saw me as artistic and creative. They saw me as not paying attention to life, not living in the real world, not paying attention to them, certainly when they talked, living inside of myself. Does this sound like you? Does part of that sound like you? Because I'm describing a psychic personality unfolding. When I was in my teenage years, I remember the long hours of crying by myself and not even knowing why. And then later on finding out that a girlfriend was mad at me. That was precognition and it was empathy. But I had no idea those things were psychic experiences. We're going to talk more about this, but to get back to my development, I was actually in my late 20s when the psychic world came crashing down on me, and I had to accept the fact that indeed I was psychic or I was psychotic, and I needed to do something about it. I believe that experience is happening to many, many people in the world today. You see, we are moving. You've heard me talk about this before if you followed my work. We're moving through a next evolutionary step here on planet Earth. All of mankind is evolving, becoming more, just like those books that I read when I was a youngster. We're all growing into something new that allows us to utilize far more of our brain, far more of all of those things that we were born with that make us psychic, that help us to perceive the world around us with more than those 5 physical senses they always remind us we're born with. So there I was, a safety engineer. I went into a profession where I could put my feet on the ground, where I was solid, where I learned to question every single bit of reality. My background was pre-med. I have a strong background in biochemistry and physics and all those sciences. I taught them for a while. I thought I was anything but psychic. I believed in things that were psychic. I was always attracted to it. I loved to read books on psychic phenomena. I picked up a deck of tarot cards at one point and said, oh, these are interesting. Well, they'll never work for me. I did a horrible thing at one point. I played with a Ouija board, which that's a big no-no. That can cause harm. But I played with a Ouija board with a girlfriend, and I absolutely knew that I couldn't be making it move. Therefore, I knew that she had to make it move. And I was right. She could make it move by herself. It was not me. If she wasn't in the room and I put my hands on that planchette, I could sit there for 3 hours and that thing didn't move. Okay? So there is no doubt, or was no doubt in my mind, that I wasn't psychic. But I was very much attracted to psychic phenomena and the spirit world, and I learned to read palms, and I thought, well, you know, this line might mean this, this might not. And then I dropped that because so many of the things I was telling people came true. And I said, nah, that can't be psychic. I'm just making that stuff up, and they're just making their world look like what I told them. So I put it out of my mind. I forgot about it. I blocked it out. I actively didn't want to be psychic. Frankly, the concept kind of scared me. I liked being Mouse Sandy, that no one could expect anything of because I was the family ditz that needed a strong man to take care of me. Now, can you actually imagine Sandy Anastasi having that belief system? Okay, but that's the belief system I began my early 20s with. And I went into a powerful psychic, or actually scientific field, and said the rest of the world might be psychic, but Sandy isn't. Psychic things exist. They're fun to pursue. They're fun to look at. Somebody else out there is psychic. I want to learn about them. I'm attracted to knowing more about that, but I'm certainly not psychic. And then when I was 28, I had a girlfriend who said, Sandy, let's take an astrology course. And I said, well, okay, who knows? Astrology might be close enough to a science it could make sense to me. So I took the psychic astrology course with her. Actually, it wasn't psychic. It was just plain astrology. It just turned out to be psychic astrology. And the teacher missed a night. And he had somebody substitute for him who didn't know anything about astrology but could teach tarot. So he taught us tarot. These were all tools. And the tools made some kind of sense to me. After all, you didn't have to be psychic to be an astrologer, and you didn't have to be psychic to read the tarot. So I picked up those things very quickly. That was the beginning of my journey, folks. Very shortly after I had started working with the tarot cards, I had what you would call in today's world a Kundalini open, a Kundalini rising experience. And I went from 1 minute where I was my normal ditzy, feet on the ground, better memorize everything, otherwise I won't get it straight self. And the next minute, I was literally hearing the thoughts of people across the street. I was feeling the energy fields around people. Because you see, when that Kundalini rises and expands your consciousness, all of your psychic senses, which to me had hovered on opening for all of my life, but never completely opened, they opened completely all at once. It was a scary experience. I was a psychic engineer, a safety engineer. I keep saying psychic because that's who I turned out to be. But I was a safety engineer at the time, and I can actually recall walking through the industrial plant and having to be very careful where I put my feet down because I couldn't really be sure where the floor was, because it all felt at that moment like different levels of solidity, and I wasn't sure until I actually put my weight on my foot that I wasn't going to fall through that floor. And I know that sounds wacky, but I think some of you have had those kinds of experiences. There was a moment when I felt like I could literally merge with a wall. I was seeing auras, literally seeing the energy fields around people. Like I said, everything opened at once. I actually had to work hard to pull it all back in, to shut it down. And it was at that time that I said, either I'm totally crazy or there is really something to this. Now, that same girlfriend I told you about who took me to the astrology class and started all this stuff had been clairvoyant. That means she could see energy all of her life. She didn't tell anybody about it. She was a Scorpio. She hid things. But she told me when I would be seeing pink around that person, she would say to me, Sandy, you're right. Their aura is pink. And I'd say, oh my God, I'm not crazy. So I was really lucky because back there in the 1970s, that sounds like a lifetime ago, folks, doesn't it? Back in the 1970s, there was no place to go and study these things, at least not in the physical world. You could hunt for it through mail order. There might be some Wiccan covens around somewhere that were parting with some information that might be helpful. I didn't know about them, so I wasn't involved. So I was helpless to figure out what was going on with me. Either I was going to go to a psychology clinic and turn myself in and wear a straitjacket, or I was going to investigate what was going on and say, guess what? If I accept the fact that maybe these things, these feelings I'm getting, these things I'm seeing, these thoughts I'm receiving that aren't even my own, things that I know are happening that happen 10 minutes later, could this possibly be real? Could I be looking at something brand new that is me that I never even considered before? And so I began a new investigation. As I worked to close those faculties back down so that I could actually control them instead of being blown wide open, I studied what was going on. I began to read and read and read. It was easy to find books back then. There weren't many of them at all. And I gradually learned that clairvoyance is having your third eye open and basically seeing things that the rest of the world isn't seeing. I'm going to go into that deeper later. Clairaudience is hearing things that either are inside of your mind but in a different voice or a thought that you wouldn't think, or it's hearing something literally audibly outside of yourself. Clairalience is smelling something that nobody else around you smells. It's a psychic scent. That's very common for people who are on this call with me who may have had a visitation from a deceased family member, and you might have actually realized you had the visitation when you smelled their perfume or when you smelled the cigar they used to smoke all the time. Clairsentience is when you can feel the vibration on an object or feel the aura. I'm going to teach you how to do that in a few minutes. Psychometry is related to clairsentience, but psychometry is that thing that psychics who work with the police do when they hold an object and they connect with the person who owned the object through that and say, oh, I know where this guy is. Okay, when you're holding an object and reading its vibration, that's called psychometry. It's very closely linked to clairsentience. So we have all of these clairs that help us to relate to the world around us with more than our physical five senses. And folks, what I learned as I began to utilize my own psychic abilities with control, and remember my first step was realizing, oh my God, I'm psychic. That was my first step. Oh my God, what happened to me? My second step was learning how to close it down. My third step was learning how to open it back up again so that I had some control. And all the while, I was investigating, what is this thing? What is it? If I accept that this is real, that this is true, what is it? And why does it work? And why is it controllable? And how can it help me? And how can it help other people in the world? And you see, that's when my journey of learning to not only do psychic readings for people and coach people, but teach people how to be psychic began. It began all the way back then in the late 1970s. So let me move on. That was just kind of a brief introduction, but I feel like you guys deserve to know where it all started for me. So I talked about psychic energy here. What is psychic energy? You know, nobody really knows. I've done a lot of work on this. Nobody really knows. But you can feel it if you're psychic, and you can touch it. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. And I know, because I see it clairvoyantly, that it fills the air around us. And I know a few other things about it too, that science is going to prove in the future. Psychic energy is very strongly connected to electromagnetic force. Some of you who are book readers might have remembered somebody called Wilhelm Reich back in the 1930s and 40s, did studies on something called orgone energy. And when Nazi Germany and Hitler and all the things that happened back then were destroyed, along with that, all of his work was erased. Now, he was onto something. And you can sometimes find his books online. You might find some on Amazon. They're worth reading. It's archaic, but it's worth reading. Because what he was calling orgone energy is what I would refer to as psychic energy. And folks, just like we have a worldwide web that you can surf through your computer like you're doing right now to be online with me, we have a worldwide psychic web. And that worldwide psychic web connects every one of us to every other one of us. So through that psychic web, we can feel one another. We can telepathically communicate with one another. We can empathically connect with one another emotionally. And remember that song, Somewhere a Baby Cries and somebody else somewhere in the universe hears it? I used to love that song because it was so true. Everything is connected. That's so important for us to understand. You cannot be a psychic, and all of you are who are here. You cannot be a psychic without knowing inside of yourself, without having that kernel of understanding that what befalls the least one of us affects the entire universe that we live in. Yes, I've just expanded it beyond the worldwide psychic web. It's a universal psychic web. Everything is connected. Everything communicates with everything else. The reason that I can do a reading sitting here at my computer for somebody who lives in Australia isn't because the computer is connecting us. It's because the worldwide psychic web is connecting us. Now, working on the computer might make it easier to aim my antenna so that I make a strong connection to that person. But the information is not flowing through the World Wide Web, and it's not flowing through the telephone lines or the electrical lines. It's flowing through the worldwide psychic web, which I believe is a form of electromagnetic energy. And mankind is right now poised on the precipice of learning to do all kinds of things with that electromagnetic force. We're about to move into a new age, the likes of which has never been seen before, at least not on this planet. And all of us have been born, I'm going to move to my next slide here, all of us have been born with all of the psychic abilities that reflect, mirror, and enhance our physical senses. And as soon as we begin to lift our consciousness above the purely physical, all of those psychic senses begin to open. So many of you who've been studying yoga, many of you who are deeply religious, many of you who have picked up something like Tai Chi Chuan or some form of physical activity that helps to raise your energy, many of you who are studying philosophies and theories that are expanding your mind are opening up to a higher level of consciousness within yourself. And as that consciousness expands upwards, all of your psychic abilities begin to automatically develop. So I started this by talking about my journey, but let's talk about your journey for a moment. I'm going to show you this simple technique that you can do right now to feel and read energy. So with me, do this. Hold your two hands up, palms up here, and clap them so that the skin is tingling. Now bring them close together, but not touching, just close together, and imagine that you are rolling a tennis ball between them. Sit up straight in your chair, breathe normally, but keep rolling that tennis ball. And before long, you're going to start to feel, in addition to that tingling on the surface of your skin, you're going to start to feel your palms heat up. That'll happen first. And then you're going to start to feel like there's something between your palms. Like there's actually something between them that is being rolled between your hands. Like there's a cushion of air, perhaps. So take your hands and very slowly draw them apart from each other, just a couple of inches. Take a deep breath and exhale. And now push them back together again very slowly, almost but not quite touching. Now pull them apart again, a little further this time. Take another deep breath, and as you exhale, push them back together again. You're starting to feel a little pressure, that like they don't want to be pushed back together, aren't you? Now pull them apart again. You feel that sensation of taffy that's developing. Take a deep breath. Exhale again. And as you put them back together again, you're starting to feel like you've got an air accordion between your hands. Keep it going. Feel that energy. Coordinate it with your breath. Breathe out as they're coming together. Breathe in as you're drawing them apart. Feel that taffy. Feel that pressure. Feel the heat building up. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay. Now, for some of you, pay attention to how it feels. For some of you, it just feels like air pressure. For some, it feels like heat. For some, your hands are starting to buzz. Some of you are actually feeling an icy sense of cold. Now take your left hand and turn it so that the back of the left hand faces the palm of the right. And continue to bring them back and forth together. It feels different, doesn't it? Now don't touch your hands, but rub or let your right hand flow along the back of your left. Don't touch. Keep like a half an inch there and run it back and forth, kind of like you're petting your aura. You're petting the energy field around you. Make like you're petting this long, invisible hair. And before long, you're going to start to feel your left hand is going to start to feel like it's being rubbed by something. Like the hair on your arm wants to stand up. Like there's the smoothness of a piece of material being run across your hand, even though your right hand isn't touching the back of your left. Folks, you're feeling your own energy field. That energy field is electromagnetic force. It is part of who you are just as much as your mouth, your legs, your arms, your hair. Your energy field is another part of you. And for a lot of you, this is the first time you're ever feeling it. Now let your palms face each other again and feel that it's still nice and warm. You can turn your right hand back to your left now and do the same thing. Pet the back of the left hand and feel that energy. Feel that flow. You know, once you've got this energy flowing, I'm back to rolling the ball between my hands while I'm talking, that energy invisible ball. If you look at the slide I've got up here, we've got one person who's rubbed her hands, and you can see on the slide the energy that's flowing from her hands outwards. If you consciously direct that energy out towards another person, as in this case, woman who's lying on the slide, you can actually send that energy to another person. In healing techniques like Reiki, which is widely accepted now, this diagram, this photograph, shows what's actually happening energetically. And someone who's seeing clairvoyantly, i.e. seeing the energy with their third eye open, would see this. Okay? So the gentleman who's got his hands over this elderly lady's head isn't seeing the energy. He's going on trust. He knows it's there. But the other person has actually done this work that we've just done. She's stimulated the energy. She's seeing it. She knows where she's putting her hands, and that energy is flowing. This is the basis for all of the psychic energy healing techniques, whether you're using quantum touch, whether you're using Reiki, whether you're using energy healing of any kind. This is the basis of it. Folks, it's real. Now, all the way back when I was in my 20s and I had that opening, This is what I began to see. This is what I began to feel. I could feel that psychic energy, or that orgone energy, if you will, all around me. I no longer just felt air. The air felt thick as I was walking through it. I felt literally like it was holding me up. Okay? Believe me, I'm not that wide open now, but I know what it is to be that open. And I also know that back then, when I first developed these skills and abilities, that wasn't a good place to be, because nobody else in the world was at that point, and I was crazy to everybody else. So I shut it down and I opened it enough that I could teach it, that I could live in the same world as everyone else, that I could speak the same language as everyone else, and I could be here now when we're all awakening. All of us are awakening to these abilities that we've all been born with. Folks, these aren't new. You were born with them. They are your birthright. So back to this slide. Who is psychic? Everyone already is, and becoming more so with every single moment that you are alive and breathe. So right now, a lot of you are probably saying, well, how can I tell? You know, Sandy, you're talking about telepathy, and then you're talking about empathy, and you're talking about clairvoyance, that's clear seeing, and clear aliens, clear smelling, clear audience, clear hearing, psychometry, clear sentience. You're throwing these words around. How do I know what types of psychic abilities that I might have? Well, let me ask you this. We all live here on the physical plane together. Most of you can see, right? Most of you have eyesight. Most of you have a good sense of smell. You can smell when the cooking's done. You can smell someone's perfume. Most of you certainly can feel the chair you're sitting in and feel the walls around you. You can feel someone's hand when you shake it. I.e., you're definitely in touch with your 5 physical senses, right? You have all 5 of them. You certainly have emotions. You get upset when something bad happens and happy when something good happens. You have a good, sharp mind. You're able to do your taxes, right? You're able to pass a test. So you have all those psychic senses in the physical form. You already have them. You have all of them. So let me ask you, if the psychic senses mirror the physical senses but expand upon them, why shouldn't you have every single psychic sense? Because I'm going to tell you that you do. Every single one here is clairvoyant. Every single person here is clairsentient. Every single person here is telepathic. Every single person here is able to do psychometry and has clairalience and clairaudience. Every single one of you has that. And if you think back in your lifetime, as I did, when I was 28 and everything got blown open, and I said, oh my God, what is this? And I began my research. I began to remember. And I remembered looking at my girlfriend's ankle bracelet on her foot and admiring it. And a few minutes later, she picked up her leg and turned it every which way and admired it herself. And I said, oh my God, did she pick up my thought? Nah. I said, nah, kid, that couldn't be. And I remembered when a girl, we were all on a softball team, and a girl twisted her knee backwards and tore some ligaments. And everybody got terribly, terribly upset. And I got sent in to get the school nurse. And I remember crying so hysterically that I had trouble running and had trouble finding the nurse. And then said to myself, why am I crying so hysterically? I can't be crying because I need to get to find the nurse. I need to do this job. And I had to battle my emotions and force them down so that I could find the school nurse. And I remember later on saying, why were my emotions so terribly out of control? And even as a child, I realized it was because everybody else on that ball field on both sides was all upset, and they'd made me upset. So I understood as a 12-year-old that projective empathy had just almost destroyed my ability to function and get help because I'm a natural receptive empath. But I didn't understand what it was. I processed it. I knew what happened. I did recognize the root of it, and then I let it go. I figured that happens to all people. Doesn't that sound like you? Doesn't everybody respond that way? Isn't that what you would have said to yourself? And when I felt, you're going to laugh at this one, when I felt somebody behind the shower curtain in my bathroom, and every time I went to the toilet, I had to peek behind that shower curtain to make sure somebody wasn't hiding in there. Because I felt like somebody was there. Every single time somebody felt like they were there. Well, of course they did. When people are taking a shower, it cleans their energy field, and all that excess energy accumulates around the shower. So I was feeling the energy of a person, just not a physical person who was there, just their residual energy. I felt that all of my life until I finally learned in my late 20s what it really was. I said, oh my God, I was feeling energy and not knowing that that's what I was doing. Folks, these things are so mundane and they're so simple and they happen to all of us. I remember falling asleep, and as I'm falling asleep or waking up, it works both directions, I'm seeing these faces look at me from the folds of the sheet. That's clairvoyance. And as soon as I wake myself up to try to see more clearly what it would go away. But when I was in that, we call it an alpha ability, where you're between waking and sleeping, and you're being able to see things at that point, in that state. And I was seeing them when I was a teenager, long before I accepted that Sandy could possibly be psychic. And I know that every single one of you here in this class tonight has had one or more, if not all of those experiences. Finishing somebody's sentences for them. Oh, that's one I get into trouble with. I still do. You see, if somebody starts a sentence, I know what's going to come next. I'm answering their question before they even know they have it. And that might be fine when I'm teaching here online, but when I'm doing it to my husband, he gets a little upset about that. He wants to be able to have a conversation, not have me have a soliloquy that he gets to watch. Okay? So honestly, all of you already have all of these psychic abilities. Now, your next question should be, can I have something that's more powerful than another? You know, could I be a natural born clairvoyant, i.e., I see spirit? Or a natural telepath, I read people's thoughts? Or do I have a natural ability with my clairvoyance for remote viewing to see things that are a distance from me? Am I a dreamer? Do I have an ability to consciously get predictive or insightful dreams? Yes, that's another psychic ability. Well, as I've been talking, and you were going over in your own mind and saying, well, that's happened to me. Oh, that sounds way out. Well, yeah, I've had that one happen. Make a list right now. Take a piece of paper and make a list of all the different things that I talked about that happened to me. What similar things have happened to you in your life? Write them down. Because those glimpses are showing you where some of your psychic skills are already pretty well developed. You see, when I teach my students, I never feel like I'm teaching them something new. I feel like I'm only reminding them of things that they were born knowing. But if you, in perhaps some former lifetime, had spent time developing a specific skill or ability, or perhaps you just have a natural inclination that's stronger for that particular skill or ability, that's going to present itself early on. So for me, and by the way, for most people, the particular ability that is most commonly developed is empathy. You're already recognizing yourself in a lot of what I'm saying. Some of you see spirit or see energy. Some of you are really good at reading the vibration on an object. Some of you can walk into a room, and this is a form of psychometry, and know what was going on in that room, whether it's a safe place or not a safe place, whether it feels comfortable or not. Some of you have bought your houses that way. Does this house feel like a place I need to call home, or does it feel like a place I need to run away from? Okay? All of you who are paying attention to your psychic abilities this way are doing exactly what you should be doing, because the more you pay attention to them, the more you let your own psychic abilities guide you, the more powerful they will become. So added to your own, I'm going to say 7 senses, your 5 physical senses plus telepathy and empathy, added to those 7 senses, you can now have double that and have all that information about your environment coming to you at any given time. Wow. Wow. That's extremely important. Now, the thing that most people, I'm going to skip over this, I'm looking for this one. Empathy is the most common psychic ability, and it's also the most dangerous right now. You know, as I mentioned before, mankind's all evolving, we're all growing, expanding. Well, as our psychic abilities expand, the next one universally that everybody is getting in spades is empathy. And empathy has become so powerful in the last few years, empathy being the tendency to pick up on someone else's emotions, right? The tendency to pick up on another person's emotions or to project your emotion so powerfully that somebody else picks up on you. That's projective empathy. So empathy can be receptive or projective. It can work both ways. Now, it's developing in spades right now. And where it's great is that if you're paying attention to how you feel about something and not letting that feeling overwhelm you, but accepting it and letting it be your guidepost. So, for example, the example I used before, if I'm going to enter a room and I feel almost like there's a wall stopping me from going into that room, that's my empathy in its more physical form would be like clairsentience. There are relative levels of this, okay? That's my clairsentience acting through my empathy to tell me that there has been or is something very unpleasant in that room. So I'm going to back up and say, no, I'm not going there. Likewise, my empathy, if I have a close friend or maybe my life mate is going through a really difficult time, if I'm sensitive and recognizing that my empathy is giving me information, I'm going to realize that this feeling of sadness that I'm suddenly getting is not my own, but belongs to my husband or my wife, or maybe my best friend. And if I am in touch with that feeling of empathy, I'm going to be able to do something nice for them. You know, gee, honey, would you like to have a little quiet time this evening? It feels like you need some time by yourself. Or do you want to sit and talk? Is this a time you'd like to talk about something? Because your feeling lets you know that other person is down and could need your help. That's when empathy is positive. It's a very common psychic ability. All of you on this call have that ability. That's receptive psychic empathy. And when you are using it in this healthy way, oh, what an amazing and wonderful tool that benefits all mankind. Healers know who needs to be healed. Husband and wives understand each other better. Friends get along better. Everyone, if you're using empathy as the tool that it is, it's an unbelievably healthy and wonderful psychic ability. But what's happening with most of mankind right now is that people don't know what empathy is. And people don't know that they are empathic themselves. So when I feel sad, for no reason at all, I just sit there and cry. I don't look out of myself to see, I wasn't sad 5 minutes ago. Why would I be sad now? Hmm, I wonder if somebody I'm really close to, maybe my assistant Lisa, or maybe my husband Ron, is feeling sad. I think I'll go ask them, are you feeling sad right now? I'm going to look for where the sadness is coming from because you see, I know it's not me. I didn't feel like that 5 minutes ago. It hit me very suddenly. That's the key, that the emotion's not yours. You see, empathy is hard to detect because it comes in as an emotion. And if you buy into the emotion, you become the emotion, let me tell you, you're going to find something to be sad about. Okay? We can always find something to justify our emotion. And yet that emotion is a tool if the empathy is used properly. Likewise, projective empathy can be so destructive. Okay? A young child, it's learned in childhood, a young child who learns that when they throw a fit in the grocery store and they kick and they scream and they punch things and they punch mommy and they tell her and push at her emotionally and say, Mommy, I hate you. Every kid's done that once or twice. But when mommy buys into that and does what the kid wants and does that often enough, that kid learns to utilize projective empathy as a psychic skill. People who are projective empaths grow up, they grow up to be really, really difficult people. In the best way, they're people who can make good healers because they know how to project their energy very well. That's the best way. But in the worst way, they can be people who prey on other people and victimize their mates, their friends, their partners, and become psychic vampires. So that projective empathy is a very fine line. So you know from what I've just said, if you're a projective empath or a receptive empath or a little bit of both, which is what most of us are. And if just from this little conversation, you have learned something about yourself and taken responsibility for it, then your taking this webinar has been worth every second of your time. Okay? Because that's huge. And that really is the next step that mankind is working on right now. I don't care whether you are working in an office or talking to people on the telephone or shopping in the grocery store. Every single person you encounter is utilizing their empathy full steam. When they get mad, they spew it out and everybody knows they're mad. Sometimes it physically hurts when I feel that. Not because they've hit me, just because the emotion is so powerful it feels like a blow. Other times they're stopped and not able to accomplish or do anything, like I was running into the school to get the nurse because other people projecting has become so overwhelming that they can't function. There's a whole lot of people in our world right now who are living in their houses locked down and afraid to go out because the emotional stress on our planet is so extreme that those people who are receptive empaths are having trouble moving into crowded areas. So empathy is a big, big thing right now. Recognize how it's acting in your life and learn to tell the difference between what is truly your own emotion versus what you're picking up from someone else. Because you've got to learn to become responsible for it. Okay? And that's why now you understand it's the most common psychic ability in our world right now. It's being developed in spades at a high rate of speed. It's a powerful ability. It can be a tremendous blessing and a tremendous gift. But it's also the most dangerous when it's not controlled. And now you know why. So the slide before that, when I skipped, is using your psychic ability dangerous to you? Can you hurt someone with it? And now you know, yes, you can. You can. Probably the most dangerous psychic ability on the planet right now is empathy. People are using the projective empathy to control other people. They're using projective empathy to create fear. They're using their projective empathy because they're not being responsible for their own emotions. On the other hand, you can control your own empathy and all of your other psychic skills as well in such a way that they are not dangerous to you, but can be very helpful to you. For example, if a projective empath is having this free-for-all in the supermarket where you're shopping, your own empathy will tell you as soon as you come into the store that there's this raging idiot over in that corner of the store, and you'll walk to the other corner because you don't need that around you. You don't need to be exposed to it. So that's your empathy and your clairsentience, which allows you to feel the vibration in the space. And the empathy is what allows you to read it. Okay? So you're using your psychic ability to navigate around situations that would be unhealthy for you. So your psychic ability can be dangerous to you if you don't pay attention to it. If you have those psychic feelings and ignore them. You have no idea how many clients I read during the course of a year who say, if only I'd paid attention to that feeling when I reinvested my money with the wrong person, when I let my daughter get into that car, when I got married to the wrong person. Only I had paid attention, I wouldn't have made that choice. So are you paying attention to your psychic abilities? I'm not saying that you need to live your life on your feelings. What I'm saying is you need to pay attention to them. You need to register what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what your clairsentience, clairalience, clairvoyance, clairaudience is telling you. You need to register that. Pay attention to it. Do not jump to conclusions. That's another mistake people sometimes make. But register what you're receiving. And then go and investigate it and get proof before you act. So if you're getting ready to build a house and you have that gut feeling that says, ugh, every time you go into the builder's home office, you're like, this doesn't feel right. So register that feeling, that gut feeling you're getting, and ask him for references. Ask him what other companies he's done work with. Ask other companies around his neighborhood, what do you think of this guy? And if it's not the right place, you're going to get your proof, and you're going to know that your gut feeling was right. Get proof. So register your feeling, accept your psychic ability, register your feeling, and then get proof. And when you start to do that, you're going to live a charmed life. I can promise you that. No seminar, no webinar, no class with me would be complete unless I talk to you about how and why you should protect yourself. What I have found over the years is that living here on the physical plane, we do need a high degree of protection psychically. It's interesting. I've heard some psychics who are really very, very well known and very adept psychics say, people who channel higher beings, who say, oh no, when you're in this space of spirit and your consciousness is elevated, you don't need that protection. You're in a space which is protected. Well, what I've got to say is that if you could stay in that altered space, if you could stay in that spiritual expanded state 24/7, that could be true. But most of us who live here on the physical plane aren't in that spiritual psychic space 24/7. You know, we're not living in a monastery spending all of our time in prayer. We're not living out in the deserts of India spending all of our time in deep meditation. We're not spending all of our time standing in front of 3,000 people doing spiritual readings, okay? I.e., we're not in that expanded spiritual psychic space 24/7. We leave that space and we come back to our everyday houses and our everyday lives to deal with everyday physical things. And on this physical plane, a high degree of protection is necessary for people like you and I who live here in the physical and are still flesh and bone physical. Okay? So please don't let anybody tell you, oh, what I'm teaching you is so spiritual, you don't need protection. Please, 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 as long as you are in this physical body, use protection. Okay? And so, of course, you're seeing this person who's in the blue bubble. One of the things I teach my students in my psychic development level 1 class right off the bat is how to create an energy balloon using their breath and their visualization to move the energy of the universe around them in a clockwise direction. It comes up from the root, goes up the spine, and then comes down and circles clockwise from left to right around them and then back into their feet. That is a fabulous protection for a beginner because the blue color is protective. A color can be protective. Blue is protective. When you visualize the energy coming up the spine, breathing it up and fountain it out the top of the head, bring it around and back into the bottom of your body again, you're literally putting yourself breathing it in, pulling it up, breathing it out, spinning it around, and putting it back into the body. You're literally putting yourself into a blue protective cocoon. This is a powerful protection that when you do go into that shopping center with the crazy person who's having a projective empathic download on the world around them, if you're in your energy balloon, you're not even going to feel it. Okay, it's going to bounce right off of you. If you have in-laws who know how to, this is a joke, but if you have in-laws that know how to stick that pin into all the soft spots, or maybe it's your own parents, and really turn your emotions upside down, you'll find that if you put yourself in that energy balloon before you go to their house for a visit, that won't happen. People do all kinds of things in today's world with their emotional projection, with using empathy, that do cause harm. And sometimes it's on purpose. And sometimes it's on purpose just because they don't feel good, so they don't want you to feel good either. And you shouldn't hold it against them. That just creates a war that doesn't get anyone anywhere. It doesn't win. What you just need to do is to protect yourself so that all those little barbs and digs and things that get hurled at you just slide right off of you. They no longer affect you. And then you'll be able to determine your own emotional space better. And you'll know what you should really react to. When I used to go to visit my mom, one of her favorite things was to pick on my hair. Oh my God, what did you do to your hair now? And of course, I was very sensitive to criticism. And I'd immediately be on the defense and drop my guard. And mom would manage to pummel me emotionally until she got a bunch of energy. And why was she doing that? Because my father was draining her energy. That energy drain can become vampiric, one person to another, to another, to another. Well, when I began to study all these wonderful psychic things, I learned to put myself in this energy balloon. And I now would go to her house in my energy balloon and she'd say, oh my God, what did you do to your hair? And instead of getting upset, I just smile and I say, I like it. What do you think? And it totally just blew her operation. And you could see the wind go out of her and she'd kind of sit back. And a few minutes later, I'd say, so do you want to talk about the argument with Dad? And then she'd talk and she'd drop her guard. And I could give her energy and love, loving her, and she'd be okay. But if I allowed her to attack me to get that energy, both of us would have ended up drained and unhappy. So how and why should psychics protect themselves? The more you develop your own psychic ability, the more open you become. And it's lovely being open. We psychics all love being open and constantly reading the world around us. It's a joyous experience. Colors are more vivid. The world has a depth and a dimension when your clairvoyance is open that it simply doesn't have if it's shut down. Sound is so much clearer. You're hearing nuances of sound in everything that you hear in voices that you never heard before. So those psychic abilities overlay every physical ability that you have. And they do it in such a way that just enriches every single thing you experience in life. It is so well worth taking that step and trusting them and learning to open them and knowing that you can, because you can do it in a protected space. Okay? So here's another question for you, and this is going to lead me into questions for you. How do you know if your own psychic ability is waking up? Well, first of all, right now, I believe that everyone, if you're here physically on planet Earth with me at this time, your psychic ability is awakening. Now, it may not all be the same ability, and it may not all be at the same rate, but I know it's waking up, it's expanding. And if you don't see it in yourself, look at your husband, your child, your mother, father, your friends, and you're going to see it awakening in them, and that's just a reflection of you. We are all waking up here. So, how do you know, though, if it is awakening? There are some real, I mentioned it before, and I want you to pay attention. If I'm sitting on my patio right now, and I look across the yard and I'm seeing that wall of green where the trees and the bushes are at the back of the yard, it used to be I was looking at a wall of green. Now, as I'm relaxing, I'm seeing into those bushes. I'm seeing all the tiny leaves. I'm seeing the branches. I'm seeing some little bird buried 3 feet back in the tree walking along. I'm seeing a squirrel. I'm seeing more. So it's almost like my physical vision has developed more dimension. I'm seeing the colors with more clarity. They're so much more intense than they were before. Same thing with my hearing. If I'm just relaxing, or even if I'm watching a television show, I'm finding all of a sudden that there are certain voices that I can't tolerate. That person's going to come on, and I have to say to my husband, you've got to turn this off. There's something about that voice that is just, it's just going straight down my spine. I can't handle it. That's because I'm hearing something in that person's voice that is negative and unhealthy for me. And now that's been going on all my life, but more intensely now than ever before. So you're going to find these nuances with your sight and your hearing, your smell. You're going to start to smell things that you never smelled before. And you're going to have to go and investigate, what is that smell? And then you'll realize it might have been something that was around you all the time. You're going to start to be able to smell if someone is a good person or a bad person by the odor that you sense around them. I remember walking into a store, and the people who were running the store were not honest. And as soon as I walked into the store, all I could smell was rotten meat. And I said to my husband, "Oh my goodness, somebody must have left a 5-day-old sandwich in the garbage pail or something." He said, "I don't smell anything." He has a much better sense of smell than I do. But that was my clear aliens telling me this is not a good place to be. And then later on, I found that they were actually taking money from people. They were stealing as they were making their sales. So each one of your psychic senses is starting to wake up. And how are you going to know that it's awakening? You're going to get the physical evidence of it. You're going to be thinking a thought, and your friend talks about it. Or they're going to be thinking something, and you start to talk about it, and they say, I was just thinking about that. You're going to be thinking about a friend, and the telephone rings, and it's them. You're going to be watching a television show, and the next day, and it's a unique show or an old movie that you pulled up. The next day you talk to your friend and they were watching the same movie at the same time you were. That's a telepathic connection. You're going to begin to realize that half the time when you're over emotional about something and you step back and you say, am I really feeling that? Was I feeling that way 5 minutes ago? And you're going to begin to realize just how much you're being affected by the emotions of other people. That's a really big. So I think you've got my point. You're all psychic. You're all on the brink of awakening to who you really are, when all of those abilities are up and running. And of course, the next thing you should be asking is, how can you further develop those abilities? How do you develop them? And this is going to sound like I'm promoting my class, and certainly I am. One of the best ways to develop your psychic abilities is by studying the Anastasi system of psychic development. And you know, there are many ways that you can study that. I have 6 books in my Anastasi system of psychic development series. The first 3 books in that series deal with developing the psychic abilities that are the foundation for everything in the psychic world that we just talked about. And this information is great for psychics, but it's not just for psychics. It's for everybody. Everybody needs to develop these abilities. And you can find all of my books on Amazon.com. They're published by Lulu Press. You can also find them on my website. So start with the books. On my website, I have videos of each book has a video that goes with it. On my website, you can buy those videos independently, one at a time, and study them in your living room on your TV. They're MP4 downloads. I also have a class that's just starting in January. It begins, I think, on January 26th, the last Wednesday night in January. I'm beginning to advertise it right now. Early enrollment is open. And to enroll, you just go to my website and click, and it'll walk you through it. That class will run from January through May. And the first 3 classes are the classes that teach you how to handle and recognize empathy, how to feel auras, how to feel energy, how to read energy. Remember we felt that energy earlier? Well, I'm going to teach you in my level 2 of the Anastasi system of psychic development, not only how to feel it, but how to use it as a tool to read what's going on for someone. Not just are they happy or sad, that part's easy, but where do they live? What's their home look like? What's their relationship look like? Are they even going to be in one in 5 years? I'm going to teach you how to use that. I'm going to teach you in those first 3 classes how to develop and use your clairvoyance. It's just an amazing, amazing course. It will change the way you experience the world. And again, it starts the last Wednesday evening in January, and early enrollment's open right now. I also have trained teachers who teach my system. So if you want to take a class in person, not online, or online with somebody else, you can go to my website and look up the various people who are teaching my system and find out who might be teaching it near you. Okay? So there's no excuse, at least if you want to work with my material, to not get training. I always say an untrained psychic, and we all are, is dangerous to themselves and other people. Because if you have these abilities and you don't know you have them, they're going to be controlling you. They're powerful, folks. They can make you that scared little person who's afraid of her own shadow, who's a total ditz, who can't take care of herself, that my parents always knew me to be. And you know, they were right. Back then I was. I couldn't be in a crowd. I couldn't walk down a hall by myself. I couldn't be in a gathering. I couldn't even have my own thoughts. I was that wide open without any kind of control. How many of you are like that? How many of you would like to know who the real you is if you could control those psychic abilities that make you so wide open that you don't even know who you are? Got to get control of those abilities first to know who the real you is. Now, if you don't study with me, that's okay. But you owe it to yourself to study with someone, or at least to get the books that feel right to study with. You need to learn. You need to control what's developing in you. And just by virtue of the fact that you're here, I know that you are psychic, that your senses are awakening, that you're developing, and that you are one of those people who needs to learn so that you can control who you are becoming. Okay. Now, there are other things on my website I just want to point out. I have a psychic protection tips that I have on my YouTube channel for free, scattered. But if you want them to feed down to you one at a time for a 6-month period, those tips can be tremendously helpful. I also have a psychic protection tips course. These are videos. And again, they're on my YouTube channel, but you'll find them in an organized way that'll drip out to you one a day or one a week on my website. So these are also good places to start if you just want to kind of put your toes in the water and see what this is like. Okay, I think I'm ready to answer your questions. This is a good time for that. I had said that I would answer questions at the beginning of our session, and I know that I probably raised a bunch of questions, so I'm expecting to have a lot of them. And let me tell you how this works. In GoToWebinar, where this is being presented, you have a little hand on the side of your screen. If you have a question, you can click on that hand and it will raise the hand, and my assistant who's in the chat room will know to call on you so that you can be unmuted and can ask your question. If you're shy, like I used to be, well, you can put your question into the chat room and she'll read it out. So, with all the stuff that I have covered over this last hour or hour and 15 minutes or so, do we have any questions, or have I already answered all of your questions? I'm beginning to wonder, have I scared you all into being quiet? Or have
I
I?
do see her hand up, so let me try and call on her. She had issues with her phone last time, but maybe we have that worked out. So,
Oh,
Mary, I'm going to try and unmute you and see if you can talk to Sandy. It says you're self-muted. Can you unmute yourself? Nope, she said I'll have to ask it for her. Okay. She's written something in the chat room here. Okay. It says I had surgery in May and did not get a typical recovery. It's been much slower than almost anybody else that I know who had the same thing done. I never thought I could heal myself, so I never really tried to heal me this time. I was getting really discouraged a couple of weeks ago, so I thought, what the heck, what do I have to lose? So I tried it. I was surprised and grateful that in just 3 days of trying the healing, I was starting to feel better. This made me wonder if this was a test to make me try it on myself so that I would know that I could easily do it.
well, that wasn't so much a question as it was a little story about your experience, which I am very grateful you shared. Mary, it certainly could have been a test. It also could have been that on some deep level, psychologically, you didn't feel emotionally as if you had the right to heal. So you could have been holding yourself back. And then when you did your healing technique on yourself, in order to do that, you had to say, no, I deserve, I'm going to fix myself. And that total change in attitude could have allowed your body to snap back into uh, being able to do the healing. You know, folks, being healthy is our natural state. Being sick is unnatural. Okay? So this might have snapped you back into that natural state of being healthy and being able to do that healing. Anyway, I'm very grateful that that worked out for you. And I think that really tells you, yes, you have that psychic ability, you have the ability to work with energy, and you also have the right to be healed and to heal yourself. So thank you for sharing that. It was a great story. Anybody else want to share an experience or have a question? I love to hear your experience.
Lori has her hand up, so let me try to unmute her.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, okay, when you were talking about not going with your intuition and then regretting it. I have a actually I have a short story and a question about that. Many years ago, I met a person, and it seemed like I knew them and instantly. I don't know how I knew them, but it was just like I just knew I knew them from somewhere. And anyway, so I invited them over to like a little gathering or a little party thing that we had. And as they were driving up in the car, the person behind the wheel of the car all of a sudden was superimposed by a figure of somebody else that was really sinister looking. And so it was like, I was kind of taken aback. It's like, did they shapeshift, or was it a warning to me, or anyway, that hunch turned out correctly, and I probably should have gone with that. And I've seen that maybe another time I saw it where somebody kind of almost shape-shifted, or their face changed right in front of me for a few seconds, and then instantly they're back to who they are again. What do you call that? Or is that...
That's clairvoyance. It's clairvoyance.
Okay.
Those experiences tell me that one of your most powerful abilities is going to be your clairvoyance. Now, It could also, though, it was definitely clairvoyance is the skill involved, but there could have been a lot of different things happening. And this is why I tell you, register what it is you're experiencing, but don't jump to conclusions about what it is until you...
I got like they were really creepy was the impression I got, which it later on it turned out to be true. So
right, and that experience was correct. But let's look behind the creepy, okay? It could have meant that superimposed maniacal face, this is just a creepy person. It could have meant that person reminded you of somebody in the past, or someone you saw in a movie, or maybe even someone you saw in a who behave like that person. So sometimes you'll see one person superimposed on another because your unconscious, or your guides, if you will, your higher self, is telling you, haha, you know how that other person behaved? Well, this one's going to behave like that too. Okay? So you're getting a little attention. Other times, it's possible there is such a thing called possession, and it's possible the guy was possessed and there was literally somebody inside of him who didn't belong there, and you might have caught a glimpse of him.
Yeah, that face was really almost like a caricature, like a distorted caricature of like an evil person, I saw him in profile, and it was just like, wow, that's really weird. I mean, this is...
Well, the good thing...
I probably should have paid attention to it, because I carried on that friendship for a little bit longer than I probably should have, and it was kind of a warning to me. Now I kind of know what to look for.
The good part is that you did recognize it, and even though you didn't pay attention and respond to it at that time, you didn't let it catch, and it could have been, it became a teaching lesson for you. And so now you do know to pay attention to that. The other thing that was good about it is that, yes, you recognize that your third eye, your clairvoyance, is one of your powerfully developed skills. It's already there. And the more you pay attention to it, the better it's going to become, and the more you are going to see. So you won't just see. Yeah. This is something I want to share with everyone, because this is kind of important. If you're someone who's not paying attention to your psychic senses, you're also going to be somebody who generally only really has them forced on you by your higher self when it's really about your protection. And so they're going to really force it on you. So you can, a lot of people who have a lot of psychic ability begin to think that, oh, I only know about things when they're bad. I want to turn this off. I don't want to know about it. The truth
is, you learn about good things. How do you notice good things about people?
You start accepting the bad stuff when it's given. See, I don't know if I'm able to make myself clear here. Your guides want to show you everything. All of your psychic senses want to operate all the time to show you everything, to feed information to you just like your physical senses do. But you are ignoring them. So the only times you're paying attention is when something happens like that and your senses are screaming at you because it's so important to get through. So you begin to think they're only telling you about negative things. That's not true.
Mhm.
They're trying to tell you about everything if you would only listen.
Yeah, I'm paying attention much more. I mean, from that point on, I started paying attention because other things started happening, and I just started paying more attention. And so,
Now,
that was probably like 20 years ago. But boy, was that ever a lesson.
yeah,
And in some ways, it's still impacting me today
yeah.
on some levels. So it was a really long, hard lesson I mean, that had I just gone with my hunch, oh man, that maybe I should just stay away or whatever. But the person seemed like a really nice person at first. So, but what do you do? Anyway.
Well, but your warning was the space in the face.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
There are other people here who've had the same experience.
Yeah.
That's not. It's common. Thank God we don't see too much of this, but it's common when somebody is possessed. And I don't know. I'm probably talking about something that to a lot of people is totally way out. But possession is when something that's not you comes in and takes over your body. Okay, that's what possession is.
Hmm.
And if somebody is possessed and you are psychic, you're usually going to see a facial overview, or you might
Yep.
see a strangeness in the eyes. It might be like I've heard people say it's almost like there was somebody looking out of their eyes that wasn't my friend. That wasn't the person.
Yes.
So there's usually some giveaway there that you're going to be able to tell, but you have to really be paying attention to catch. And you
Hmm.
say, oh, that person's possessed. Sometimes it just might be, like I said before, it's your higher self reminding you of some unpleasant person that you saw in a movie or that you had a connection to in the past. So
Yeah.
stay away from this person. Be wary of
Yeah. So that probably is what set me on the path of trying to learn more about it and just practicing and paying attention so yeah, maybe I needed to have that to get me going on my path. So
Yeah,
I suppose there's good things that came out of it too.
yes, I was going to say, I'm glad that you just had that little conversation with yourself because guess what? You're absolutely right. Okay? I think that sometimes our guides put us in a position where we have to get the kick in the rear end so that we recognize how valuable the experience is, and you pursued and investigated pretty much the way I did, okay? And
Hmm.
you began that pursuit because of that negative experience. So in the long run, it wasn't a negative experience at all.
Yep, a
Yeah,
life lesson.
yeah, just a major life lesson.
Hmm.
Very good. Lori, thank you so much for sharing that. That was a great story.
Yeah.
Great story. Anybody else have something they'd like to share with us?
We actually have several others in line.
Okay.
So the next person is going to be Madalena. Can you unmute yourself? Madalena?
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Sandy.
Hello there.
I'm glad to be here, and I want to know first off if there's going to be a replay available.
If you are here on the webinar, you're going to be getting a copy of it that's forwarded to you. Okay.
Oh, great.
If you're, and probably, I'm not sure how it's going to happen, but it probably will be made available on my site for sale. But where and how, I don't know. That we really haven't gotten that far. Okay. But if you're here, you're going to get a copy of it.
Thanks. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I get a lot of animal seems to be my responses, and my information comes through when I'm paying attention to what I was thinking. A cockroach will come by, a butterfly, a moth in a certain location. I get a lot of animals and insects and things right in front of me. So I guess that's part of my abilities.
It is. That's related to clairvoyance. Let me explain how it works. You are what we call that synchronicity, mostly is what you're going to hear them say, oh, synchronicity. But those animals, that insect, that thing, if you look it up, it's now telling you an answer to your question. So what's happened, you see, is you've developed a language with your higher self where your higher self knows that when you have a question, that if it gets you to look to your left and there's that fly,
Right, right, right.
see, but the communication is a three-way communication. The higher self has to locate that thing in your environment. Now, it's not that you created it, the thing has been in the environment, but your higher self gets you to look at it, and you may find yourself all of a sudden you're looking at two or three different things. Now, when that happens that way, it's related to clairvoyance, because even though you're not visualizing something that someone else is seeing, your attention is being drawn to something your higher self is drawing you to deliberately. Now,
Right.
by extension, there's something else that's occurring here as well. There are actually times when you are going to draw to yourself that thing your higher self wants you to see. And I know you're familiar with what I'm talking about. Um,
Yes.
there you are driving down the road on a perfectly brilliant sunlit day, and there's an owl sitting on the road in front of you. Okay, that
Right,
owl
right,
doesn't belong there. You drew him there. Okay,
right.
so now that is bringing in another ability I haven't really talked about. That's physical medium. And what physical mediumship is, or can actually that's not the correct term. Kinetic mediumship. Kinetic meaning motion, energy. A kinetic medium is able to make things move, is able to touch something and draw that something to them. You follow? It's a different,
Yes.
it's not mediumship like we think about mediumship talking to a dead person. This means physical mediumship. So in your environment, you probably are also sometimes able to move something, make the lights flicker, or the sound
Yes, yes.
off on a television show you don't like. All that's
Right.
kinetic mediumship. So welcome to being a kinetic medium, my friend. And yes, your higher self can use that skill, which is yours, to draw that owl to you in the middle of the day. And it doesn't know why it did that, but it's obeying that kinetic medium. See, the higher self gave the command, but it had to use your energy to draw the owl there.
That's great.
Yeah,
Happens so much. I'm glad you answered that. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome. That was a great question, too. Anybody else?
And we have a couple in the chat room. Excuse me. So I'm going to read out Jerry's question first. If someone is losing their physical sense, vision, hearing, etc., do they lose their corresponding psychic ability?
Oh, no. No. I have several examples of this. My favorite is I have one of the teachers of my system is a woman. I fondly call her Pete. I've known her for years, and she just that's her nickname. Um, when she was taking my classes, which is maybe back in the very early 1990s, she was about 95% deaf in her left ear and totally deaf in her right ear, and went through all of my psychic development classes. Now, she owned a new age bookstore, and she lip read. She did not wear hearing aids. They didn't help her because there was nerve damage. So she was a lip reader. Well, I remember being in her store one day, and she had gone through my classes 2 or 3 times. She's now a teacher of the system, and there she was behind the counter checking people out, and I'm on the other side of her store with my back to her, and a woman is asking me a question behind a couple of bookshelves, right? And this woman asks me where a certain book is. And I'm in the process of telling her, gee, I don't know if Pete carries that. And from across the store, Pete yells, yes, I do, Sandy. It's 3 shelves up and it's all the way in the end by the door. And I was like, oh my God, she heard our conversation. She's stone deaf, and she heard our conversation. Now, she was born with the physical ability to heal or to hear, okay? So that ability, though, was lost in childhood due to a serious illness. But here, when she took the psychic development classes, she regained the ability to hear. Now, I know in the course of her life since then, that's many years ago, sometimes her ability is high and she can hear almost like a normal person without hearing aids. Other times it drops back down, and it seems to go along with whatever stress is going on in her life. So we know that stress shuts down, and emotional distress especially shuts down all those channels through which the psychic energy comes to you. But if you can keep yourself in a calm, centered state, yes, your psychic abilities are going to be able to open, and once open, they can actually replace the physical abilities. I have a story of my own to share as well. I have macular degeneration in both eyes, but more seriously in my left eye than my right. And I first noticed it way back around 2004 or 5. And so I simply supplemented with my clairvoyance. And it's interesting because recently I had an eye test done where they do a field of vision test that I'd never had done before. And all normal full-sighted humans have a little spot in their eye near to the nose, both eyes, that you're not going to be able to see through. It's a blind spot, and it's normal. Everybody has one. I don't have it because you see, out of this eye, I use my clairvoyance to supplement what my macula is not allowing me to see. And so when they do a field of vision test on me, this eye sees the entire field. Isn't that interesting? And my doctor has just had to live with that. Okay, but there's physical proof that I'm able to see that. So the answer to your question is no. If the physical faculties shut down, the psychic faculties can continue seeing, feeling, tasting, thinking, etc., etc. I have another proof. I have a very dear friend who is in the process of dying of dementia. And this guy, maybe 8 years ago, more than that, 10 years ago, when he was first diagnosed, I taught him how to make that connection to the higher self and do all of his thinking up here instead of in here. And here it is, 8 years later, and he has outlived all of the predictions for his type of dementia. And guess what? He still thinks, he still pays his bills, he still knows who everybody is. His body's beginning to fail because dementia hits the whole body, but it never affected his mind. So, yes, the answer to your question is a big, bright, glowing, wow, fabulous yes. I like that question. Who's next, Lisa?
Okay, we have one more that I see. And this is also in the chat room. And this is Jody. Would like to know, she said, after dealing with a not so positive spiritual experience, is there any advice that you have for me?
Well, I'm not sure what the spiritual experience you're talking about is. I could give you more information then, but I'm assuming that in the course of your development at some point you opened to something which turned out to be very unpleasant, and you got zapped by it, and have been running gun shy ever since. I'm making that assumption. Now, I don't know if that thing that you opened to and got zapped by was a person, whether it was an energy, whether it was a physical experience you stumbled into, because without that definition, I don't know. But the fact is that you experienced something that hurt you or harmed you so badly that now you're afraid to open back up again. And, the fact of the matter is that you can continue to, some people do this. Some people say, I really don't want my psychic abilities. I'm taking your classes, Sandy, because I want to shut them down. I have had people do that. But I've got to tell you that just about everyone that's ever done that, in the process of learning to control them, i.e. shut them down and open them at will, and protect themselves, they've developed a confidence to step beyond that and recognize that, wow, I am so much more able to handle every aspect of life with my psychic abilities active but controlled than I was when they were shut down. So most people will take that step forward, learn the protections, learn the control, and learn to re-embrace who they really are. And Jody, I hope that answered your question. Okay. And Lisa, who is next?
That was the last one.
Okay. And would you look at that? I said we were going to finish at about an hour and a half after we started, and we're just 5 minutes or so over. You know, you guys must have been watching the clock for me. So I have really enjoyed having you all here with me tonight. And I really hope that I've stimulated your interest in the psychic world enough and in developing your own talents and skills and abilities that you really want to go out and do something about it. Because you can help not only yourself, but so many people in the world if you allow yourself to become not a different person, but more of who you already are. Learn who you are and develop all of who you are. Okay? Take my love with you. I hope to see you in a class one day. Good night, everybody.